Talk some football now with John McMullen, who is writing about the Eagles offseason and the NFL at 97.3ESPN.com. You know, every time I feel like I take the day off, John, something crazy kind of happens. It never fails. And the day I take off, sources inside the Eagles paint Carson Wentz as selfish, uncompromising, and playing favorites. Now, I know you wrote about this, and we're on yesterday with Josh to discuss it. However, I do have some questions of my own regarding, you know, you've been a reporter for a long time. I'm sure there are times where you have sources, and we had Evan Macy on earlier, to try to show the listeners that the validity of these comments aren't all that outlandish. You know, some people just want to bash the reporter and say, this is fake news. But a lot of times, look, I can't imagine there aren't some guys in that locker room that don't jive with Carson Wentz, right?
No, I mean, we talk every day. We've already talked about this. I mean, the issue with that piece, from my perspective, is that people read the headline, they see the incendiary adjectives, essentially, about personality traits that have long been reported. We talked about these personality traits. We've talked about the type A personality. We've talked about his uncompromising nature. We've talked about his want to have more autonomy at the line of scrimmage. We've talked about Frank Reich in the past, talking about how headstrong Carson is. None of that was new. What was new was the actual adjectives placed to it by people in the locker room. And I get people get upset about it, but I know Joe. Joe's not making stuff up. People issuing death threats are idiots. And it's just football. Settle down. So while I say that, on the second end, I'll also criticize Joe a little bit for going a little bit too far. And this is sort of the landscape in general, and what now we all have to put on hats. One hat, we're a reporter. Another hat, I'm on here with you. I give my opinions. You're an analyst. And sometimes they get meshed, and it gets a little bit messy. And I think that's what's kind of happened to Joe a little bit. But I don't doubt the statements and the quotes at all. In fact, I know they're true.
Right, and having the editor come on to basically further it by saying, look, he's got to get these quotes through me that need to happen before that thing gets posted. And the editor comes on and says, look, I listened to the recordings and I saw the text messages. Therefore, I felt fine in going forward with this story. He also said something I found very interesting was that they had a bunch of stuff, but it wasn't until about a week and a half ago that something really put it over the top that made him say, okay, I feel like we can go with this. And it seems that, John, a lot of players are coming out. I don't know what that does for you. The players aren't all that surprising that they're coming out. It's the ones that aren't speaking that I think people are kind of, saying, all right, well, that's fine if Zach Ertz comes out, Chris Long comes out, Malcolm Jenkins comes out. But, is this one of those things where universally the entire – unless you hear from everybody, there's going to be doubt?
Well, yeah, now everybody's keeping a scorecard, and that is also a sort of a different generation we're in and social media, and everybody's trying to whittle down the sources. I mean, those of us who are there every day kind of know who it is, and that's not the point. You can go on, I got news for you. You can go on Twitter and say something. You're not under oath. You could say something else off the record, believe me. So don't put a check mark in anybody's column because they went on Twitter. It's just the environment we're in. And even people criticizing anonymous sources. And I mean, the majority of people don't understand how you have to go about things in journalism. And it goes far beyond sports. It goes with any form. And anonymity is an important part of being able to tell the truth. Maybe you don't feel comfortable to tell the truth on the record, but you do feel comfortable to tell the truth off the record. It's long been a part of journalism. It will always be a part of journalism. And the anonymous source is where you get the truth, to be honest.
Yeah. I mean, I don't find any fault in that. Obviously, there are people in there that are a part of the team that have something they want to get off their chest, but they also don't want to rock the boat with their relationship of the player. And he goes out of his way in the story, I think anyway, to suggest these players want the best for Carson. They want him to be the quarterback. They want him to be great. But there are some speed bumps that might be preventing him from getting to where these players want him to get.
Well, yeah, and that's where I said too many people get caught up in the headline. And I think the headline didn't do Joe or Philly Boyce any favors, because that's what, Mike, too many people read headlines and don't read the rest. Right next to, and I put this in my column at 973ESPN.com, right next to selfish and uncompromising. And by the way, the second one is not even really an insult. But right next to that was hardworking, intelligent, adjectives like that, but they're not in the headline. So there was balance to the piece as a whole. And again, I from my perspective, it wasn't all that earth-shattering as far as news. These personality things we've talked about many, many times, dating back years to when Carson first got here. And I know, speaking to Frank Reich on numerous occasions, and he went on record once he left, he was very frustrated at times with Carson and his inability. I don't want to say inability, but his refusal to listen, particularly about protecting himself and things like that. He's a very headstrong guy.
Just adds more fuel to the.
Knew this.
Yeah, it just adds more fuel to this, fire of these Foles, the Foles camp that feels that he's the better fit because he maybe isn't even the better player or the better fit because he's the better person or easier to deal with.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the case. I mean, I think when you talk about good people, I think you put Nick Foles and Carson Wentz in that category. I think you're lucky as an organization.
Yeah, to suggest one guy's a better person than the other is not fair.
Yeah. No, not fair at all. And again, and I use Tom Brady as an example. I mean, nobody has an issue with Tom Brady, who shows a lot of these similar traits, is incredibly competitive, and is often seen. People in Philadelphia got all over Tom Brady for not shaking Nick Foles' hand after the Super Bowl because he's that competitive. He's that upset after a loss. Those types of players and superstars in every sport all have egos, all have that type of personality, all have that work ethic, all have that competitiveness, and that's a large part of their success. Right. I think a lot of this is a non-story, to be honest.
I agree that a lot of it is not. It shouldn't be all that surprising. I think some of the quotes in there are a little bit like, whoa, like, let's see, Carson Wentz's biggest enemy is Carson Wentz. He's had his ass kissed his whole life. I mean, that kind of sounds like.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what I said. The incendiary part of it was the new part. And that is eyebrow raising because guys, he has been portrayed as this sort of all shucks Midwestern kid who wears his faith on his sleeve and it's all good. But I always say, those who practice hero worship are ultimately always going to be disappointed because the human condition is flawed. I wrote about this a lot in Joe Paterno's downfall in Penn State. The people out there treated him like a god. And these are human beings. Everybody has flaws. Carson Wentz has flaws. Nick Foles has flaws. Everybody does.
Right.
If you're going to put him on a pedestal, you're ultimately going to be disappointed when some of the negative comes out.
Yeah, I mean, would you kind of view this as, I don't want to say like a character assassination, but I certainly think Carson Wentz, the I don't know, the man or the player, I don't know, took a little bit of a hit when you look at this, as opposed, not necessarily like saying this guy can't play. That's not what it's saying, but it's certainly suggesting that he's not the high and mighty, likable guy that maybe everybody's making him out to be.
Well, and that's I would default back to what I just said about putting people on a pedestal. And I say this, and I've said it a lot about Doug Peterson. I think his strength as a coach is keeping the locker room on the same page. When I say that, that doesn't mean 65 to 70 people are going to all like each other 100% of the time. That's impossible. Think about the next 60 people you talk to, Mike, at some point. Are you going to like them all? Are they all going to like you? It's absurd that people think there is not different sort of personalities in every single NFL locker room. And there are guys who like each other and guys who don't like each other. As a coach, though, your goal is to get them all going in the right direction and manage these different personalities. And I think that has been the strength of Doug Peterson. But everyone assuming that all 69 of the say there's 70 people in that locker room, including practice squad and injured guys, to assume the 69 other like Carson Wentz, what are the odds of that?
John McMullen here on the Boardwalk on the Hotline. Do you think this helps him in the long run? Like, does he learn from this?
Well, I don't know if he learns from it as much as maybe, I know, and this is where I'll also, Joe was on a different radio station in Philadelphia, and he kind of inserted himself in the story, and that's where I'll criticize him. He shouldn't do that as a reporter, and he kind of said it would help Carson and fuel Carson. I don't think he cares. Part of the issue, and part of the type A personality, and part of that headstrong personality, part of the uncompromising nature, is he doesn't care what other people think, and that's how he's gotten to where he is in his athletic life. So, do I think this story is going to help Carson Wentz? No. I don't think he cares about this story. Ultimately, he may mature. Ultimately, he may improve, as we all do, and things start to click as you gain experience and wisdom. But no, I don't think he cares about this story.
Of the things in there that he didn't want to run Foles plays, or that he kind of was, testy with Groh or bullied Groh. Does any of that matter?
No, it matters what type of coach you have, and this is a league-wide issue, and I kind of asked this on Twitter, and this is before this story came out. I asked this because if you look at, and I cited Tony Romo's performance as an analyst, which blew everybody away. And he was reading the defense in real time and telling you what Tom Brady was seeing and telling you what Tom Brady was going to do before he did it. You'll notice that was a one-way street, however. Not many people have. Because Tom is doing things at the line of scrimmage. Young quarterbacks are not. In this league. And to me, in the past, it's not even a question, it's a fact, that is the type of quarterback you craved as a coach. That is the type of quarterback you wanted, because you have such a huge advantage when they're able to get out of a bad play into a good play and do things like that. It kind of depends on the coach. What does he want? We lived through Chip Kelly. I always say my biggest indictment of Chip Kelly is he would never want a quarterback like Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. there are now a lot of Chip Kelly-like coaches in this league that don't want quarterbacks thinking at the line of scrimmage. I ultimately think Doug would like Carson to continue to develop, continue to be able to handle things at the line of scrimmage, and that will ultimately be an asset for the Eagles. For other coaches, it might be seen as anything but an asset. It depends on the coach.
Right. John McMullen here. Let's talk some football. Bob Sutton fired. He's the defensive coordinator for the Chiefs. Not much of a surprise there, right?
No, I mean, you always have to have a scapegoat in these situations, and that obviously was an historic offense and a bad defense. And so he's the easy scapegoat. I'm not necessarily sure it's fair. It's never fair in these type of situations. It's interesting. If D Ford doesn't line up off sides, they win the game. They're going to the Super Bowl, and he probably continues on. That's sort of the razor's edge that coaches live on. And unfortunately for that team, the defensive guy was going to be the scapegoat.
The officiating on Sunday, we talk about a lot. I know where you stand on it, but is it enough that the NFL will take a look at changing something, anything?
Well, I would ask you, and I just wrote about this today on 973ESPN.com. It's kind of a be careful what you wish for estimate. I think everyone is overreacting to an admittedly egregious call that was blown. However, what are you encouraging? You're encouraging more legislation in this league, more rules.
I'm almost suggesting no. I see what you're saying. I'm almost suggesting that they lessen the legislation if possible.
Well, I've been writing about that for 20 years, and nobody understands.
John, what is the CFL rule? I did read that the Canadian League allows you to challenge pass interference calls, which I don't even know if I'm for, but I do think, and I've said this before in terms of the big hits, the helmet-to-helmet hits, that these guys, now in this case they didn't throw a flag, but typically they just throw a flag because it looks violent, that somebody upstairs can take a look at that and say, we threw the flag, let's look, he threw it because of safety, but let's see if they really did connect heads or helmets, and we can rectify that quickly. I don't know if you could do that with pass interference or not, but something to where these egregious the foul on – I'm almost more outraged at the foul on Brady than I am the non-call in the other game.
Well, yeah, and everybody focuses on a mistake in a big spot, and that's what I asked people. That's not the problem. Look, you've always had a human element to this game. You have a human element in every sport, whether it's balls and strikes in baseball. We've seen charge or non-charge in basketball. Pass interference has been that big issue for professional football. Guy blew the call. But the minute you overreact it, you give the NFL sort of this go-ahead to create more legislation to a league that has become untenable as far as officiating. Nobody can do this job because they've made it that difficult. There's too many things you have to worry about. There's too many judgment calls that players can't, that officials can't do in a game where the speed only increases year by year by year. And then there's this is the worst. You've heard it numerous times, Mike, since the blown call. This is the worst in NFL history. And it's like, I realize that everybody's not a history buff, but I've said it. Look up Mike Renfro. You don't have to go that far back. Everybody remembers Steve Young to Terrell Owens? A few minutes before that, Jerry Rice fumbled. It never would have happened. They blew the call. You have, as I said, the most famous play in NFL history is the Immaculate Reception, which is called the Immaculate Deception in another city. It was probably an illegal play. The Music City Miracle, in hindsight, was an illegal play. Human error has always been part of this game. It's not excusing it. You want to get as much right as possible, but the more you legislate, the more you're going to get wrong. And I've been saying it for years. They just make it more difficult to officiate these games, and it's going to get even worse if you bring in pass interference into that equation of looking at it on video. It's a slippery slope, and it's going to be an ugly slope if they go down it.
Yeah, man, it's just tough. Like, you watch these games, and it sucks that you had 2 overtime games, great games, and the games themselves are secondary to these calls, and it should be that way. But that's what it is, right? I mean, for Sean Payton to come out and blatantly just say, that's the Super Bowl call you missed.
By the way, how about Sean Payton? Think about this. The last time, I mentioned all those things, the last time the Saints were in this position and they went to the Super Bowl and they won it, they won the NFC Championship game in the game now known as Bountygate, where Sean Payton, think about this, Mike, Sean Payton and Greg Williams got banned from the league because of what they did in going after Brett Favre in a legal fashion. However, the officials swallowed the whistle. Was anybody protesting that on Bourbon Street? They won the Super Bowl. And Sean Payton and Greg Williams were banned from professional football for a year. So, look, I'm not, I get it. And I've been one for years who have said officials' calls are important. They cost people jobs. They should do everything possible to get it right. But the easiest way to do that is to ramp down on the legislation, not ramp it up.
We'll get into the Super Bowl, obviously, a lot more in the coming days and weeks. However, from the games on Sunday, we had the Rams and the Patriots. And it's interesting, John, because these were the two teams that essentially started this Patriots dynasty. That upset against the Rams has brought us to the point of where we are now.
Yeah, and I think Sean McVay was 16 at the time of that game, of that Super Bowl, which was Tom Brady's first of 5 Super Bowl wins. This will be his 9th Super Bowl appearance. This dynasty is unbelievable, and I respect it more now that I've gone through it with the Eagles, because I said it in the past, the grind of going and playing into February and the short off season, it took a toll on the Eagles. And they were able to get back to the playoffs, and I think that's a success. This team has been doing this for 2 decades. Short off seasons, constant turnover in the free agency era. I don't think there is a credible argument against Tom Brady for being the best quarterback of all time, against Bill Belichick for being the best coach of all time. I mean, what they do is
I agree.
Unbelievable.
Well, and I mentioned, think about the Golden State Warriors. They seem like they have been the team for 4, 5 seasons now, and double it for the Patriots. They've been doing this for double the time that Golden State has been on top. For Golden State, think about 5 to 6 years down the road, they would still have to be playing at a similar level.
Yeah, I mean, San Antonio they had that incredible run, would be a little bit closer as far as longevity. I mean, this is 2 decades. This is 2 decades of incredible success of the New England Patriots. Essentially, they make the Super Bowl 50% of the time. They make the AFC Championship so much that people are joking on their the AFC Championship Wikipedia page. It's it's the game you get to play the Patriots to go to the Super Bowl. And the AFC East, I mean, forget about that. If you're a New York Jets fan, think about all those years ago, Mo Lewis knocking Drew Bledsoe out of the game, and here comes Tom Brady to torture you for 2 decades because you knocked Drew Bledsoe out of the game.
Crazy. All right, plenty more football in the coming days and weeks. We will all be live at Super Bowl 53. McMullen will be there the entire time. We will be live on Radio Row Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And we will already, some special guests are already lining up. We'll continue to compile those. McMullen will be there. Grayson will be there. I'll be there. We'll have others there. We'll have Super Bowl 53 covered like no one else in the Delaware Valley. All right, pal. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Mike.